Welcome to the Protagonist Club. It is November vlog time. And I am going to... This is so amazing for me to even say this. I'm going to reread a book. So I'm going to reread Little Women by Louisa May Alcott. And I hauled this earlier this year, I believe. I still haven't gone through and released all the pages yet. I need to sit down and do that. Probably do it as I come across them. But this is the edition, as you recall, that has all the inserts in it, you know, handwritten letters and journal entries and, for instance, I just pulled this at this is a recipe for pineapple cheese. And it's printed up, both sides. It's illustrated. And I am seriously considering making some Little Women inspired recipes from the reading, so maybe I will make that. I don't know. I'll need to sit down and read the recipe, see what it says, but you know, here's a handwritten letter to Marmee. So I really think this is going to enhance this reread experience for me. I am looking forward to it immensely. I probably have not read Little Women in, as you hear the girls grumble, 4 decades. Hang on again. So I know that Little Women is the second book in this series. Who is this published by? Chronicle Books. And the first book, or not the first book, the other book in the series is Pride and Prejudice. So depending on how this reading goes in this version, I may pick up the Pride and Prejudice version and read that next year. So it does open up with an introduction, and it is so kind to give a warning in the beginning that says, contains many spoilers. Translation, don't read the introduction. Even though I have read this before, I do not remember most of it. So I do not want spoilers. I want to go in, you know, with a fairly clean slate. I'm sure I remember more than I think I do, but I'm also quite sure that I have forgotten more than I should. So I am looking forward to it. I remember enjoying it immensely and just devouring it when I read it. I probably read it when I was 10 or 11. 11 has to be the latest I read it. So it's been a very long time. And it is one of those books I think I can reread and not know what's going to be happening in the next, you know, turn of the page, which is always my problem with rereading books. And so, let's start. I am so looking forward to this. Well, that's chapter 1 complete, and I remember why I love Louisa May Alcott's writing. I'm already drawn in. I don't remember the story. I cannot wait to finish this. We've already come across our first insert. It is the letter that Marmee brings home for dinner. And, you know, the first thing that struck me as I began chapter 1, and it's the very, you know, it's on the very first page of the book. The very, you know, it's just how much of a tomboy Jo is, and how comfortable Jo is being a tomboy, and how accepting her sisters and Marmee are of her tomboy ways. That is a very stark contrast to a lot of the nonsense going on in our own personal lives these days. And it is just so refreshing to see a tomboy portrayed and comfortable and not wanting to be anything else but a tomboy. It's just amazing. And I am probably going to spend most of the weekend reading this. I have a couple of other books in progress right now, and as soon as I finish those, I will be coming back to this one, and I will bring you on that journey with me. I am undoubtedly going to be cooking along with this. My husband's waistline may not appreciate it, but I can always put the gingerbread away for Christmas or send it to the office with him. So that is the first chapter of Little Women. And I am looking forward to the rest of it. I will bring you along with me. And yeah. Okay. Next time. All right. We are back. I did not make it very far in this edition of Little Women. It is beautiful. I am enjoying the inserts. However, those inserts, some like this pocket is very thick and very full, and it is very difficult to read the actual text without, at least if your name is Tammy, the pervasive concern that you're ruining the inserts contained in the pockets of the book. It is, they don't flop nicely. Like, the actual text will flop nicely, but if it's, excuse me, the bird is in the room. Knock it off. So the actual text will flop if there's enough distance between insert pages, but when there is not, it always flops backwards. It just, like, this one is just stuffed, and you can't bend it easily to fold onto the other pages, and it completely disrupted the flow of reading the actual book. So there is a Pride and Prejudice version of, just like this, except it's Pride and Prejudice, which I was considering getting because I love the inserts. I love the, overall look of the book. And, the text is small, but it isn't the tiniest text I've ever seen. It is tiny, however. But no, I cannot read this book with that constant nagging fear in the back of my brain. I just couldn't do it. So I did go and order another copy of Little Women. And this is a Wordsworth edition. And there it is. It has a lovely spine. I'm probably too far away for that to show up closely. I will put inserts of them in here. This is perfectly legible. It's, not the floppiest of books, but it is floppy enough. It has beautiful artwork on the cover. It is just the text of the book. There are no annotations. There are no explanations. It is exactly what I want. And this beautiful edition was like under $8, maybe under $7. That's Fireball dropping a ball. So it was a no-brainer. Okay, now that you've heard me blather on about why I've changed editions, let's talk about where I am so far. I am on chapter 5. Chapter 5 sounds right. Yep, I'm on chapter 5. And I'm easily going to finish the first half of the book today. And the first half is Little Women, and the second half of the book is Good Wives. The story is definitely coming back to me as I read it. Of the 4 sisters, I am still Jo March. I was Jo March when I read this. I was probably 10 or 11 when I read this. While I was not a tomboy, I always had my head buried in a book, just like Jo. Fashion and all those things didn't interest me either, just like Jo. So, yeah, I am still very much Jo March. I am making note of all the books that are referenced. They are all things I want to go back and I either read or reread in some cases. And it is such a pleasure to read a book where tomboys can still be tomboys and feminine at the same time, and there isn't the societal pressure to be one or the other. The giving nature of the March girls, especially at Christmas, is so refreshing and so missing from today's world. They were thrilled with little books from Marmee, and they willingly gave up their quote-unquote elaborate Christmas breakfast to someone who needed it far more than they did. And they remember what it was, Meg and Jo definitely have memories of living in better times financially compared to Beth and Amy. And there wasn't a hesitation. There wasn't but we used to have this and I miss it. And so I should, I'm entitled to it. Attitude. It was no second thoughts. They willingly gave up their Christmas breakfast and delivered it to a family in need. And their giving hearts are such a contrast to not just modern society, but modern fiction as it's reflected, as, modern culture is reflected in fiction. And it's just so refreshing. And I remember so much why I fell in love with this book when I read it. And while I am not a big rereader, I am very glad I decided to reread this one. My heart is just singing with joy. And if you know me, you know I cannot carry a tune. So Dave is probably grateful he's not here to hear me hum. So I am going to go drink some coffee, undoubtedly put the bird outside. Yeah, I'm going to go put Pickles outside. I'm going to do my nails and read. I'll be back in a little bit. Okay, it's update time on Little Women. Did not get as much read as I anticipated getting read, and my bookmark is wrong. I'm a little over halfway through the first half of Little Women. As you know, it's divided into two books, Little Women and Good Wives. They were initially published separately, and they are in almost all editions of Little Women. They are combined into one book. So I am, despite where my bookmark currently is, I'm just about halfway through the first half of the book. And it's so funny. I have always, in my head, identified with Jo March. Always. From probably the moment I picked this book up, way back in ancient history, she was the most like me. Now, I say that. I'm just not a tomboy. I was always the bookworm who would choose to stay home than go out and have adventures, unlike Jo, but much more so than Meg, Beth, or Amy. It was Jo March. And Laurie was just... He was probably my first book boyfriend. And honestly, I understand why much younger me fell in love with him. And even as the story receded, in memory as time elapsed, Jo and Laurie were always there. They may not have been at the forefront, but if you ask me a character that is so like me in many respects and the exact opposite of me in many other respects, it's Jo March. Quick to anger, had to learn how to control that. Great love of books, writing, the ability to hold a grudge and then having to work through that. Her intense, undying loyalty and love of family, and just all of it. Now, unlike Jo March, I can actually cook. I'm not necessarily the epitome of a tomboy. I was at no point in my life the epitome of a tomboy. Family legend goes that from the time I was very little and capable of, clearly communicating my wants, needs, and desires in life, I was the child who, if I got a speck of dirt on me, went inside and changed clothes. And 9 times out of 10, when I went inside and changed clothes, I changed into yet another dress. So, yeah, I was never the, go tromping through the woods and get dirty kind of girl. Certain things hold true throughout your life, and that is definitely one that's held true. So, I am just... This novel is amazing, and the contrast between today and the time of publication is so stark. It is so sad. I don't know a better word for it. It's sad how far we have come from raising caring, compassionate, selfless children. I mean, time and again, the March girls give up personal comfort to help somebody else, or, choose to do without so that their sisters can benefit. And I'm not saying all kids are like that, but I'm saying the vast amount of our culture is very similar to that, and is just sad. It makes me sad. I don't know how else to do it. It makes me sad. So I am going to go finish the first half, and then I'll be back. Okay, so same day, I just had to change clothes because I'm freezing. Sounds ridiculous, but most comfortable chair in the house. Great natural light. Right in front of the fireplace. Except there's an air conditioning vent right above my head. So, put on slightly warmer clothes. Finish the first half of Little Women. And, not unexpectedly, I sobbed. Mr. March coming home always gets me. Always gets me. Meg figuring out that she really loves John always gets me. So, yeah. And it's such an amazing book. Am I sorry it's taken me 40 plus years to reread it? No, I'm really not. Even though I just said it's an amazing book, it's also the story is coming back to me, and it's familiar, and there's not a lot of anticipation left. I mean, as good as Little Women is, my favorite book by Louisa May Alcott isn't one that's ever talked about, and you rarely find, it's hard to find copies of it, is Jo's Boys. I loved that book. I loved everything about it. If I find a copy of it that I like, I will pick it up. No question about that. I loved that book. So I will read the second half of Little Women, probably some more today, definitely tomorrow. Tomorrow is Friday. This is such a, I want to say it's such a wholesome story, but it's more than that. Yes, it's a wholesome story, and yes, it's sweet and clean and just a great coming of age story. But it's meaning, you say coming of age story today, and you immediately put in the mindset of angsty teenage nonsense. That's nonsensical, trashy stories. And this, while there is some teenage angst, it isn't teenage angst of today. There is just a very different tone 150 years later of expectations and responsibilities and duties and risks. Scarlet fever isn't really something the modern mind frets about. And yet it was still very much a thing in 1860. And that comes across so perfectly in this book. And, Beth recovers, but she's never herself again. And how Beth's illness changed the family dynamic would have been a much more common situation when the book was written and released than it is today. Today, it's much more confined to siblings and children who have a chronically ill sibling. And I mean, for the most part, we are healthy, and what used to kill children in their childhood or in their early teenage years is not much of a risk anymore. And these girls just mature over the course of that first year in the book, into, young women. I mean, at 17, Meg is probably far more mature than her 25-year-old counterpart 150 years later. She certainly has better, household skills. So it's just I'm enjoying the read. It's also just a very good reminder of how far we have come and how blessed we are as a society. And sometimes I think we forget that because we are so disconnected. And it's very nice to pick up a book and remember that human beings were once not so disconnected from each other. And I'm not sad, even though this is a very sad note. I am very glad I picked it back up. I'm very glad I decided to reread it after all these years. And it's making me wonder if I should pick up the book that sold me on historical fiction way back in the day. I haven't read it since. And that is Tree Grows in Brooklyn by Betty Smith. I loved that book as a child. Loved that book as a child. So if I find a good copy, I will pick it back up. So, okay, that is it for today's clip. I am going to go do some homestead chores and make sure dinner's defrosted, and then I will pick the book back up and I will check in tomorrow or Saturday. We shall see. And yeah, I know people are about to get married in the book, and I am looking forward to it. So, until next clip. So when I started this vlog, I had every intention of this just being dedicated to Little Women, and it was going to be my vlog for November. And that was the plan. The plan has changed. I am currently reading All in Good Time by Carolyn Asfalk. This is Catholic contemporary fiction, and it is so amazing. I am like 57% in, and I impromptu decided to include it in this vlog. This is my third book by Carolyn this year, and she has a Christmas book left that I believe is adult, and then I think that exhausts her current catalog of adult fiction, and I'm very sad about that. But so All in Good Time, and if you hear a gulping noise in the background, it's the dog's water bowl. I need to go fill it, and I just need to get this done first. The premise of the story is our heroine is Melanie. She is a widow with 3 young children, all beneath the age of 10. They're somewhere in the range of 7, 5, and 2. And our hero is Brian. And thanks to the eldest son, Matthew, playing baseball, Melanie and Brian get to meet. Brian is helping coach his nephew's team as the third base coach, thus sets up their meeting. And we quickly learn, and by quickly, I think it's the opening chapter. If not the opening chapter, it's very early on in the opening chapters, that Brian is struggling with an addiction, and it's not drugs, it's not alcohol. It is adult content on the internet. Can't say the word because I'll get censored by YouTube. And this is a actual real life problem, and it is handled in a very faithful, respectful, and yet realistic manner. And this is a subject that has frequently come up in conversations with my girlfriends, and that sounds weird. It's come up in conversation because it is something that is an obvious problem in culture. That's why it's come up, not because anybody I personally know is struggling with it. Okay, that clarified. And he has it under control. He's handling it with God and faith, and you see him struggle with it and overcome it. And at one point, as Melanie and Brian have navigated the complicated waters of a single parent dating, Melanie at one point confesses that during her marriage to her husband, she was lonely and not, got tempted by the smutty books, and she indulged in the smutty books, and she didn't skip the smutty passages. She, in fact, read them and reread them and relished in that fulfillment she was getting that she wasn't finding at home. She even confesses to Brian at one point in the story that while she never imagined another actual man when she was with her husband in an intimate sense, she was guilty of the fictional character imagination. And she realized this was a problem, and she ditched all the smutty books. And this is just a very honest real life book without it being preachy or judgmental or uncomfortable to read. It is something you can relate to, whether or not that is something you suffer from or it's, a challenge in your life. It is relatable. And I'm at the part where at 50% in, breaking all the rules, the breakup happened. I don't want to tell you why the breakups happened. I don't want to spoil that, but I will tell you at 57%, Carolyn is breaking my heart. Like I had every intention of finishing the first book of Little Women this afternoon, and the chances are really high that that's not going to happen, and I'm going to finish All in Good Time today instead because I have to know. I cannot go to bed another night with this situation unresolved between Brian and Melanie. I cannot. I want them to have a happily ever after. I want those 3 kids to have a stepfather who thinks they're the most amazing thing in his world. And that's how he feels about those kids. The faith in this book is superb. The writing is glorious. The characters are relatable. There is nothing bad I can say about this book right now, other than Carolyn is breaking my heart at 57% in. I'm going to go read for a little bit after I fill the dog's water bowl, and I'll be back. I need to read you something. It is so beautiful, I have to share. This is All in Good Time, and Brian has gone to church, and he's alone in church. That's the background. Compelled by an unseen force to move from the pew, Brian shifted uncomfortably. No longer able to relax, he twisted in his seat and glanced around the empty church. No one beyond the glass doors in the back. Choir loft vacant. Altar bare. Brian slid out of the pew and strode towards the front of the church, his boots clomping against the floor. When he reached the point where the pews ended, he got down on one knee, then the other. With the last glance to make sure he was alone, he lay face down on the floor. His heart stirred, and awareness swelled in his chest. It seemed as if a protective hand hovered above him, heightening his sense of being loved and secure. The cold marble floor sent a shiver along his body, chest to toes. If he could have gone lower than the floor, he would have. For the first time this week, the broken pieces of his life fell into place. The ability to reassemble them escaped him, but somehow that didn't matter. He could entrust each ragged edged piece to the one who made them, confident that somehow they fit. His illness, his unchastity, his fractured relationship with Melanie. While it had seemed to him that his life had spun wildly out of control, an order and a purpose existed, even if he couldn't discern them. That passage in the book is just beyond resonates with me. For me personally, walking into church and letting go and letting God and just the peace that comes with that in that holy place is always a highlight, always a reminder that as blessed and as loved as I am in everyday life, I don't have to do any of it alone, and I don't have to struggle on my own. And Carolyn has captured it beautifully in that passage, and I had to share. You can sort of see her. Have you ever wondered what it'd be like to read with a lap lump? Look, my very own gray lap lump, or as her daddy likes to refer to her, the house hippo, aka land seal, known as Kahlua. She has been very clingy all day. Apparently she doesn't feel good. So yeah, this is what it's like to read with a lap lump. Oh, you want to say hi to the nice people? Come here, lappy lump. I know. Oh, poor girl. So I am at 91% complete in All in Good Time, and it is fantastic. I will give you my full review here in a couple of minutes, but I had to share the lap lump. Yeah, and in case you're wondering, yes, those are tears glistening in my eyes. I just finished All in Good Time. Yes, I still have the lap lump. I don't know if she'll show up in the actual video once I get it edited, but yeah, she's still here. She is Miss Clingy today. It was phenomenal. I gave it 5 stars. I got my happily ever after. There was some it was just excellently plotted and beautifully written and filled with faith in a very different way, complimentary but different way than her then Stay With Me and Come Back to Me. But there is one similar thread running through it, and that is the brother of the male protagonist having fallen away from the church and then coming back to the church because of the faith and the life example of his brother. And I love that example, and I love that continuity thread between books. Completely unrelated books, mind you. In the case of All in Good Time and Stay With Me, they're absolutely unrelated, and yet there's that continuity thread, and I adore that. And I loved this book. So far there has not been a miss for me from Carolyn, and I am eagerly anticipating her next. Whenever it comes, I will read it. As long as it's adult fiction. I will try the teenage fiction maybe, but it's not my bailiwick, and I'm not reading for, any teenagers, so. But if you want a story about a 30-something set of characters, and they have kids and trying to navigate the realities of life and dating with kids and all the complications that go therewith. And this was just a beautiful book. And while it is specifically a Catholic book, and the faith is very specifically Catholic, it's also, I don't think any Christian would have a problem reading this book, and I cannot recommend it enough. It was absolutely beautiful. And although it was not my original intention to pair or, have this vlog be 2 books, they actually pair very well together. Because White Little Women is a classic and is not a Catholic fiction book in any sense, there are 2 very similar themes between the books, and that is the love of family and how family shapes your life and shapes your decisions, and how with the goodness of God and faith and the love and security you find in family, all things are possible. And they are very complementary in that sense, and I am very glad in the end I decided to do a surprise, mid-vlog insertion of a book I was 50% of the way through, because it was beautiful, and there are some very beautiful quotes in here, and let me pull them up and then I will share. I love this quote. It is just so descriptive. If the first kiss was sweet as spun sugar and light as wispy vapor, this one was as rich as warm ganache and as unsettled as a voluminous storm cloud. I just absolutely love that description. And I really like this quote. It is Melanie talking in her head. They shared this temptation, not the same, not quite, but close. As a guy, he sought images. As woman, she sought words. But they were both trying to quell their loneliness, both seeking their own pleasure. His pleasure came at the expense of women he didn't know. Hers came at the expense of her own husband. I think, given the discussions that I have had on my channel, amongst friends, other people have had on their channel and amongst their friends, about the damage and pervasiveness of incredibly explicit material in books, that quote is very, very on point. Just very, very on point. And this is my favorite quote from the whole book. Only God had control. They knew that better than most. But when life spiraled out of control, they didn't need to bear it alone. God remained present forever and always, of course. But God had given them to each other, too. This book was filled with faith, and she has some incredibly beautiful quotes. I didn't read you all of the ones I highlighted. I rarely highlight on my Kindle, to be honest. And in the back of the book, she has resources if you, the reader, or someone you know is struggling with the temptation and or addiction to pornography There are resources in the back. Some of them are purely secular. Some of them are Catholic in nature, and there's even a resource, and your Kindle will link it for you if you buy this on Kindle directly to the webpage, that can help your kids learn to reject. And let's just be honest, we all know that unfortunately in today's culture it is very hard to prevent your kids from stumbling onto images they should not see. Wasn't really a problem in my day and age. I would definitely say it's a problem now. So, why this book deals with some very controversial and touchy subjects. It was beautifully written. It wasn't preachy. It wasn't judgmental. It was a very realistic, faithful journey of what it's like, and I cannot recommend it enough. I've truly loved this book, and while its subject matter is very different than Little Women, the themes of family and love and faith, I think, mesh very well together. And the juxtaposition between, 2024 and I can't remember exactly the year Little Women is set, 1861, 1862, is very startling and very shows how much life has changed in the intervening years. So, okay, I am going to go dislodge my little lap lump and pick Little Women back up here, and I will see how far I get today. It'll probably talk to you again tomorrow, but I am very glad I interrupted. So. All right, we need to have a talk about Good Wives. As you know, it's the second book that comprises what is today modern Little Women. And, yeah. I've always said on this channel that I don't reread. And this is the second book I've reread this year. The first one was Recorder, but I reread that with Book Club, which was a great experience. And my opinion of the novel didn't change, but it also wasn't, I didn't have anything to look forward to. I knew exactly what was going to happen. So, however, Good Wives is an example and a terrific reminder to myself not to reread books I loved as a child. Because when I say I didn't enjoy Good Wives, that is not descriptive enough. I skipped multiple chapters in their entirety after starting them. I couldn't be bothered. None of the characters are likable. The Amy and Lori romance is completely unbelievable to, much older me. I didn't tear up when Beth died. I found Joe's sudden desire to open a school for boys. Ludicrous and nonsensical. She's never piped up a word about it at any point in either of the two books, and all of a sudden it's her life's work because of a man she quote unquote fell in love with. I didn't believe that this time around either. And Meg, is peripherally in the book. She opens it by getting married. She has kids, and then she really doesn't have anything to do with the story until she's suddenly not so needed by her children, and she's jealous that her husband is not paying her enough attention, even though she's brushed him off for the last, year and a half, 2 years. The whole thing was just irritating. And in large part, it's because I knew what was coming. In large part, it's because there was nothing left to anticipate. I kept waiting for Beth to die. Joe's jealousy and ambivalence towards Amy is readily apparent in this book. Her brusque demeanor was just off-putting the entire book. Lori went from being this loving, mischievous, happy, privileged young man to this self-centered, flirt who, changes affections at the drop of a hat. I did not like Good Wives. And now I am so disappointed as an adult that I am not going to go pick up Joe's Boys, which was my favorite Louisa May Alcott novel growing up, because it's going to taint it if I reread it as an adult. So if I had to give a star rating, I would give the first half of Little Women a good solid 4. And I would give Good Wives, I'll give it a 2 because I did skim finish it. And overall, that's going to average out to a 3. I did not enjoy it. Seriously, it left me unsatisfied. I found all of the characters shallow. Found none of the relationships believable. I didn't like Marmee. I didn't like anybody, honestly. I mean, why did the twins have their own chapter? Yeah. As you can tell, I finished it yesterday, so I'm recording this on Monday morning. It was not a good reading experience. It really wasn't. It made me sad. I loved it as a 10-year-old. Lori was just the greatest thing. And the first half of the book was so much better than the second half. I loved all the literary references. I wrote them down so I could go back and read the ones I haven't read before. And all of that, the literary references were missing from the second half of the book entirely. why did I torture myself? Because that's what it felt like. At a certain point, it just felt like I was torturing myself. And someone told me I should have DNF'd it this weekend, and they're right. I should have DNF'd it. I should have just stopped putting myself through it. But I kept waiting for it to recapture the magic it once had, and it didn't. It didn't. So, yeah, that was me reading Little Women. I know this will not be a popular opinion on the book, and I'm okay with that. You know, books all hit us differently when we read them. They all have different meanings at different stages in our lives, and it's not a commentary on anybody else who absolutely loves the book as an adult. I just do not. I just do not. I loved it as a child. So, yeah. On the other hand, I did really love All in Good Time by Carolyn Asfalk. If you couldn't tell in the middle of this video, please go read that book. It is important. It is beautifully written. It is full of faith. That was the best book I read this week. So, okay, I'm going to wrap this vlog up. I hope you have a much better reading experience with Little Women if you haven't read it than I did. And please be gentle in the comments when you come at me for not loving it. But, you know, we're all entitled to our opinion, and in my opinion, it is very low on the middle of the low reads for me. So, okay. Leave a comment down below, like and subscribe, and I will see you here next time at the Protagonist Pub.